They are constructing a barrier across Africa, 8,000 kilometers from end to end. That is roughly the distance from Paris to Beijing. Not cement, not iron, but trees. And the Earth refuses to hold them. The Sahara is creeping southward. 12 million hectares of usable land vanish every year. A region the size of Greece, every 12 months. Erased. What is left behind is not soil. It is a shell. Iron-heavy laterite clay, baked by decades of drought into a sealed lid you cannot drive a spade through. Denser than compacted gravel. Slicker than a paved road. Rain strikes it and skips off. Slides across the top without ever sinking in. Carries the last of the topsoil away with it. 250 million people live along that boundary. That is more than Brazil and Canada put together. And the boundary is creeping toward them. My grandfather worked this earth. My father watched it die. I watched my father walk away. 2007. The African Union unveiled the largest land recovery effort ever attempted. 100 million hectares of ruined ground brought back by 2030. 100 million hectares is roughly the size of Tanzania. They named it the Great Green Wall. $50 billion. 10 million jobs. A corridor of healed land 15 kilometers across, running the entire breadth of the continent. 11 nations, from Senegal on the Atlantic shore to Djibouti on the Red Sea. Now watch what it genuinely costs to establish one tree in ground that refuses to accept one. Stop. Half of you assume they simply scoop out a hole and set a sapling inside. If that were true, they would have wrapped this up 2 decades ago. Here is why they did not. The first obstacle is the ground itself. Sahelian laterite crust is not dry earth you can water back into life. It is a sealed surface. The iron oxides inside the clay have fused under decades of heat and weight into a layer so rigid that rainfall gathers on top, sits there, and burns off. Or it slides away and strips whatever loose material remains. Not a single drop reaches the roots underneath, not one. You cannot till it with ordinary machinery. A tractor-mounted disc plow glances across the crust like a skate across ice. The disc bounces, the teeth slide, the driver makes another run, the surface stays shut. Bulldozing is worse. The blade splits the crust, but wipes out the thin band of surviving biology beneath it. The microorganisms, the fungal webs, the termite colonies that trap the last of the moisture in the ground. Destroy those, and what you have left is rubble. So they open it by hand, one hole at a time. The method is called Zai, developed centuries ago in Burkina Faso by Mossi farmers during an earlier drought. Set aside once the rains came back in the 1950s, and brought back to life by a single man during the disaster of the 1980s. Yakuba Sawadogo, a farmer from Yatenga province in northern Burkina Faso. Everyone near him was leaving. The wells had emptied. The herds had died. The fields were stone. He remained. His neighbors called him insane. People were walking away, and the animals and the trees were dying. I stayed because the soil was still down there. Beneath the crust, it was still there. He picked up an axe and a shovel and began chopping holes into the hardpan during the dry months, long before any rain. Not wide holes, 20 centimeters across, 15 deep, laid out in rows 80 centimeters apart. Thousands of them across a field of naked rock. Then he did something nobody in the modern era had attempted. He packed each hole with animal manure blended with soil taken from termite mounds, pressed it down, and walked away. The termites arrived for the manure, and they performed a job no machine could match. They tunneled outward from the compost into the surrounding crust, drilling a web of fine passages through the sealed layer, cracking it from underneath, centimeter by centimeter. When the first rains came, every pit trapped water. The water followed the termite passages downward instead of sliding away. The seeds sprouted. The roots hunted the moisture down through the tunnels. Inside 3 years, trees stood on land that had been naked rock. Inside a decade, 40 hectares of forest, more than 60 species, on terrain every specialist had labeled permanently finished. He received the Right Livelihood Award in 2018, the Alternative Nobel Prize. He passed away in 2023 at 77. His forest is still spreading. He did not plant trees. He rebuilt the ground so it would accept them. Now stretch that to 100 million hectares and watch what happened when they tried. The early programs, beginning in the late 2000s, did the obvious thing. They planted trees, millions of them. Long, tidy rows of seedlings pressed into unbroken ground by hand, watered once and abandoned. Inside 2 years, 80% were dead. Not because of drought, because of the wrong method. No pits, no compost, no termite activation. The roots struck the sealed laterite layer a few centimeters down and halted. The first rainless month finished them. Millions of seedlings, millions of dollars, photographs of green rows that turned into photographs of brown sticks. Look at this. They returned to the Zai. But here is the engineering problem that almost buried the entire project. Zai pits, cut by hand, demand 300 man-hours per hectare. One worker putting in 8 hours a day needs 37 days to prepare a single hectare in 45-degree heat with an axe on ground that behaves like concrete. 100 million hectares at 300 hours apiece comes to 30 billion man-hours. More labor than any single project in human history has ever swallowed. If they cannot mechanize the pit, the wall collapses before it begins. In Burkina Faso, the Institute for Environment and Agricultural Research built an animal-drawn tine, a heavy steel blade harnessed to a pair of oxen. The blade rips across the sealed ground in one direction, then turns 90 degrees and repeats, carving a grid of crossing furrows into the crust. Seeds at the intersections, compost on top. 300 hours fell to 50. 6 times quicker. In Senegal, the mayor of a rural commune handed out petrol-powered augers. A handheld drill with a hardened steel bit sinks a Zai pit in seconds. Drop compost, drop seed, squeeze the trigger, next hole. But here is what nobody saw coming. Zai only functions on level ground, and most of the Sahel is not level. On a slope, water does not gather in pits. It runs. Running water over loosened ground is not irrigation, it is erosion. You make the problem worse. So they use half-moons, semicircular earth banks, 2 meters wide, cut into the slope and heaped on the downhill side, staggered in rows along the contour, so overflow from one row feeds the catchment beneath it. Each half-moon is a miniature dam. Water hits it, gathers, soaks down. Building them is heavy earthwork. Crews carve the crescent shapes into the slope with mattocks and short-handled hoes. The dugout soil is piled onto the downhill lip and pressed firm by foot or with hand rollers. The bank is shaped to an exact cross-section, steeper on the inner face, tapered on the outer, so it holds under flow, but lets surplus escape before it bursts. If one half-moon gives way, the escaping water rips through every bank below it. One miscalculated profile, one night of heavy rain, and a whole slope loses both its water and its soil in a single night. Behind the half-moons, stone buns. Lines of rock laid along the contour, 50 to 100 meters long, pinned with larger boulders at either end, wedged tight in between. Workers haul the stones by hand from collection points, sometimes across kilometers. Every rock set down, fitted against its neighbor, and inspected. The line must trace the contour precisely. The stones do not halt the water, they slow it. Sheet flow meets the line and loses speed. Sediment settles out on the uphill side. Season after season, a band of fresh soil accumulates behind each bund. Grass moves in first, then shrubs, then trees arrive on their own. Nobody plants them. They come. Each line of stones is leveled using a length of clear hose filled with water, held between two people walking the contour. If the line is off level, water concentrates at the low point and punches through. This is not gardening. This is hydrology. Built by hand, one rock at a time, across millions of hectares. Now watch what failed next, because the seedlings nearly killed the project a second time. The early nurseries raised whatever they could get. Fast-growing exotics, eucalyptus, neem, prosopis, species that shoot upward quickly and photograph well. They died almost as fast as the pitless plantings. Not because the species were weak, because they were wrong. A eucalyptus in this soil drinks more water than a shallow aquifer can replace. It grows hard for 3 or 4 years, pulls the water table below the reach of everything near it, then dies when the well runs dry, and everything around it dies too, because the water is gone. No planning, no matching, no grasp of what the soil could actually carry. The replacement program took years. Agronomists from national agencies and NGOs like SOS, Sahel, and TreeAid went back to the survivors. The trees that had come through the droughts with no help at all. Acacia Senegal yields gum arabic and fixes nitrogen into the soil. Balanites aegyptiaca, the desert date, sends roots 15 meters straight down to reach permanent moisture. Ziziphus mauritiana, the jujube, fruits during drought and feeds families. Species with taproots shaped over millennia to punch through laterite and find water at depths no planted seedling can reach in its first year. But these trees cannot be ordered from a catalog. Their seed has to be gathered from surviving wild trees scattered across thousands of kilometers of semi-desert, each one genetically tuned to its own rainfall, temperature, and soil chemistry. Seed collection teams travel for weeks, locate surviving mother trees, harvest seed as it ripens, clean it, test it for germination, keep it cool and dry, and raise it into seedlings over 6 to 12 months. Every nursery grows stock for its own district, from seed gathered in its own district, matched to its own rain and its own soil. No two nurseries are alike. No standardized planting stock crosses a national border. Every seedling is local. This is the reverse of industrial forestry. This is engineering at the scale of the individual tree. Then comes the water, and this is the hardest part of all. Yearly rainfall across the planting belt runs from 200 millimeters in the north to 600 in the south. That is enough to grow trees, if you can catch it. The rain does not fall gently. It arrives as 3 to 4 months of violent storms, 50 millimeters in a single hour, then nothing for a fortnight. Another storm. Silence. If the water is not captured within the first hour after it lands, it is gone, evaporated or drained away. There is no second attempt until the next storm. So they build water harvesting infrastructure at a scale nobody has attempted in dryland before. Village-scale collection basins. Shallow ponds sealed with compacted clay or concrete, fed by surface channels cut along the slope above. A single basin holds enough water to carry a nursery through an entire dry season. Excavating the basin is machine work where machines can reach, and handwork where they cannot. The lining is critical. Miss a patch of clay, and the basin empties into the ground overnight. The crew has to test every square meter, flood the basin in stages, mark the leaks, dig them out, repack, test again. Sand dams. Low concrete walls thrown across seasonal riverbeds. When the rains come and the river runs, water spills over the dam, but the sand and gravel it carries settles behind the wall. Season after season, the dam fills with saturated sand. The water inside cannot evaporate. It sits underground, shielded from the sun, and can be pumped for months after the river has gone dry. Site the dam wrong, and the flow cuts around it. Build the wall too tall, and it fails under pressure. Let the sand be too fine, and the water drains straight through instead of being held. Every dam is a wager on hydrology. Every wager takes a full rainy season to settle. For individual trees during their critical first 3 years, drip irrigation. Solar-powered pumps drawing from boreholes or sand dams, feeding narrow plastic lines across the planting site to individual seedlings. Each tree receives a measured trickle, just enough to keep the roots alive through the dry months until they find permanent moisture themselves. The lines have to be maintained. Sand buries them. Animals chew them. Sun rots the plastic. A broken line means a dead tree. Any tree that survives its first 3 dry seasons can carry on without help afterward. The infrastructure is temporary. Built, used for 3 years, taken apart, moved to the next section. 3 years of life support per tree, then the tree stands alone. Now the logistics. And this is where no engineering manual helps. 8,000 kilometers, 11 countries, several of them at war. Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Chad, and Sudan all carry active armed conflicts inside the Sahel belt. Planting crews work under military escort in some districts. In others, entire sections have been given up because nobody can get in. The countries share no common administrative system. Money arrives from more than 45 sources: the African Union, the World Bank, the European Union, the Green Climate Fund, bilateral donors, international non-governmental organizations, and private foundations, each with its own reporting template, fiscal calendar, audit rules, and definition of what counts as restored. Senegal counts hectares planted. Niger counts hectares where trees are shielded by fencing that keeps livestock out. Burkina Faso counts hectares where zai pits have been cut. Ethiopia counts hectares of rangeland closed to grazing. No overlap. Nobody is counting the same thing. 2020. The project reported roughly 18 million hectares restored out of 100 million. But independent satellite studies found that most of the reported gains rested on activities, not results. A tree planted is not a tree living. A hectare fenced is not a hectare restored. The Great Green Wall still has no unified satellite monitoring system measuring actual green cover at site level. European and Chinese platforms are under construction, not yet running. By the time they are, the 2030 deadline will already be behind us. The numbers. 8,000 kilometers shore to shore, the distance from Paris to Beijing. 15 kilometers wide. 100 million hectares, the size of Tanzania. Zai pits at 300 hours per hectare by hand, 50 mechanized. Half moons shaped by hand to a cross-section that holds, or the slope is lost in one storm. Stone buns laid one rock at a time, carried by hand, leveled with a hose full of water. Nurseries raising local seed from local trees for local soil, no two alike. Collection basins tested square meter by square meter. Sand dams filling across seasons, each one a wager on hydrology. Drip lines built, maintained for 3 years, stripped out, rebuilt. 18 million hectares in 13 years. 82 million still to go. $50 billion estimated. $20 billion pledged. Only a fraction has reached the ground. But this was never going to be a wall. The engineers worked that out within the first decade. An unbroken ribbon of forest 8,000 kilometers long does not survive politics, armed conflict, funding droughts, and 11 governments holding 11 definitions of success. What survives is a patchwork. Pockets of recovered land loosely linked, each one looked after by the community living on it and living off it. Every pocket holds its own water, grows its own food, sells its own gum arabic and shea butter and balanites fruit, and shoves the desert edge back by a few kilometers. Not a wall, a chain of anchors. The Sahara does not have to be stopped. It has always drifted south in dry centuries and north in wet ones. The land along its margin has always been borrowed, never owned. What Ouagadougou demonstrated with 1 axe and 40 hectares of naked rock is that the crust can be opened. What the Great Green Wall is attempting to demonstrate is that it can be opened across an entire continent. 100 million hectares is the target. 18 million is the reality. The gap between those two is not money, not politics, not logistics. It is 82 million hectares of sealed ground still waiting for somebody to cut the first hole. The crust is still there. Beneath it, the soil is still there. The question was never whether the technique works. A farmer in Burkina Faso settled that in 1980 with an axe and a sack of manure. The question is whether the world can dig fast enough before the desert takes what is left.